Good evening. I'm Stephen Clark in Zagreb, Croatia. This is a country at war. It has lost nearly a third of its territory and gained nearly 500,000 refugees from neighboring Bosnia-Herzegovina. Over the next hour, we'll follow a San Diego humanitarian group as it tries to deliver medical supplies to the front line. This is Barry LaForgia, Executive Director of San Diego-based Southwest Medical Teams.
These came from donors throughout San Diego County, different hospitals and pharmacies throughout San Diego County.
He has shipped nearly $2 million worth of donated medical supplies from San Diego to Bosnia-Herzegovina. We're going along to see how and if they get there. It's a dangerous trip that takes us from the capital of Croatia right through enemy territory to the Adriatic coast, where the medical aid arrives on ships. We'll travel through towns and villages like Gospic, wiped out by bombs and mortars. We'll often come within mere yards of enemy snipers. Finally, we'll make the toughest decision of the trip, whether to follow those supplies into one of the hardest-hit cities in Bosnia-Herzegovina, Mostar. Along the way, we will see much destruction, despair, and defeat. In the faces of these victims of war, we will also see hope. What has happened in Yugoslavia in the last year and a half is kind of like a boxing match with 3 fighters in the ring. But one of the fighters is a heavyweight champion. Another is an amateur lightweight. And the third has both hands tied behind its back. In this 3-way boxing match, the referee is the United Nations Protection Force. But so far, it has only watched the lopsided fight, doing nothing to stop it. The weakest fighter, Bosnia-Herzegovina, sits squarely between Croatia and Serbia. More than half its population is either Croatian or Serbian. The other half is Muslim. Earlier this year, the Croatians and the Muslims of Bosnia voted to withdraw from the Serbian-controlled communist government of Yugoslavia. Serbia, which also controls the powerful Yugoslav army, responded with force, saying it was trying to hold the republics together. Judging by the destruction we saw in cities such as Mostar or in Sarajevo, it's hard to believe Serbia is trying to hold Yugoslavia together. It seems more likely the Serbs are trying to drive the Croats and the Muslims out of Bosnia and keep the land for themselves. In the meantime, Croatia, its hands tied by a UN arms embargo, has been able to do little to help the Bosnians except to welcome its refugees. In most wars, refugees are a byproduct. In this one, they seem to be the objective. 2 million Croats and Muslims have fled their Bosnian homes, most of them winding up in squalid refugee camps like this, scattered throughout Croatia.
Most of them are old people, senior people, children, and women in risk.
This is Vladimir Tonkovic, Croatia's Deputy Minister of Health.
They need medical supplies, they need food, and they need to be treated good.
The Bosnian refugees have put a terrible strain on Croatia's already crippled economy.
Well, they are still coming, but we have no place anymore to put them in.
They are the faces of war, the children who have lost their parents, civilians caught in the crossfire, families who no longer have homes. This is the face of anger, frustration, and bewilderment. The face of a parish priest as he looks at his destroyed church.
Yeah, he has been building this church and reconstructed for 40 years, and they did that in one day.
We're still miles from Bosnia-Herzegovina. This is the first destroyed church we've seen, but it won't be the last. Churches seem to be a favorite target.
How close are the nearest enemy troops?
700 meters away.
These Croatian soldiers tell us the enemy, called Chetniks, are just beyond those barricades. The Croatian soldiers laugh at this Chetnik, an effigy made from the uniform of a Chetnik soldier who was killed. But they know the real Chetniks are no laughing matter. The Chetniks are violent, roving gangs of renegade Serbs.
Have you fired the gun at them?
Yeah, they shoot at me and I shoot at them. Chetniks destroyed it.
Trouble is, the Chetniks have bigger guns, guns supplied by the Serbian army.
We're about 10 kilometers from Gospic, the bombed-out city. As you can see, the bridge over the River Lika is not in any shape to travel.
Destroyed bridges and enemy-controlled roads show us why it's so difficult to get medical supplies where they're needed.
We have some surgeon needles.
That's one reason Barry LaForgia of Southwest Medical Teams is making this trip, to see if and how the supplies his team sends to Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina get in.
Yeah, these are the syringes. I want to make sure.
And Barry LaForgia is also dropping off supplies along the way.
They give the insulin in one.
Some of the first good news for this bullet-riddled hospital in Gospic. Figuring out where the supplies are needed and getting those supplies into the right areas takes a complex network of aid groups.
Lavage sets.
With Southwest Medical Teams in this trip are people from an Atlanta humanitarian group called MAP International. They worked with LaForgia to get the pharmaceuticals brought here. Pliva, a Croatian pharmaceutical company, is the link between what comes from the U.S. and how it will get in, through often dangerous and unpassable roads. Members of Pliva often act as the group's translators as well.
Dr. Very nice to meet you, Doctor.
Barry LaForgia is predsjednik dobrotvornog društva Southwest Medical Team se zove. Iz California.
At this hospital, these medical supplies will begin to help them rebuild. This is the face of one of the littlest victims of war. He became a victim while playing in his own backyard.
Here is a case of the child stepping on a mine and legs, wounded legs. The most preferable targets are the kids, where the kids play in the playground.
He's one of thousands of victims, young, old, mostly civilian, in cities throughout Bosnia-Herzegovina. These are the areas that need medical supplies most, but they're also the most dangerous to get to.
The Sarajevo is surrounded by the Serbs.
It's very dangerous.
Yes, it's extremely dangerous. If we try to go directly in Sarajevo, they will kill us.
But that hasn't stopped Dr. Hozo Izzet of the Muslim aid group Muhammad from risking his life to bring life-saving drugs and equipment to victims in Sarajevo. It hasn't stopped Dr. Pablo Sicaria from the Catholic aid group Caritas either. They will travel from Split back to Sarajevo together.
It is dangerous to do this work, but when we know that people need there, if we know that we can save some lives there, we don't think about our lives at all.
This is what they're risking their lives for. And this is what brings Barry LaForgia of Southwest Medical Teams halfway around the world from San Diego.
Antiseptics over here, methylate.
$1.5 million in medical supplies.
Looks like these are Bricanol. Yeah, Bricanol. Can you use Bricanol?
Yes, naturally.
Most of it bought with money donated by San Diegans.
You see it all, it's here.
It's pretty overwhelming. You know, this is the first time I get to really see the shipment.
Southwest Medical Teams usually sends teams of doctors into areas like this. But in Bosnia, there's no shortage of doctors, but the bombs have wiped out hundreds of hospitals and destroyed tons of medical supplies.
They're sterile.
So that's why Southwest Medical Teams is here. But there's no guarantee these supplies will make it to the people who could die without them.
They take it from here, and
Are you going to go along with them on this particular leg of the trip?
no. They have their ways of getting in. I wish I could.
A reminder to those on this trip that by the very nature of what they're doing, where they are going, they have become targets.
We're in an underground hospital in Bosnia-Herzegovina, and this hospital is literally underground, 20 floors under a mountain, in a converted nuclear fallout shelter.
It's hidden because in this war, hospitals are a favorite target.
The enemy has been bombing hospitals, is that correct?
This is correct. In Croatia, a neighboring country, every hospital was bombed.
There are no patients here now. The bombing has stopped in the area the last few weeks. But
And last night, the Jajce and the Bihać hospitals were bombed again.
when the bombing starts, badly wounded patients from above-ground hospitals can be brought here. A storeroom has become an operating room. The walls are lined with medical supplies from San Diego.
It makes us feel good.
This time, Barry LaForgia can make sure the right supplies are being sent.
We can put in special orders through pharmacies in San Diego where we can get some of this equipment at cost, and we'll be able to send you some. You want vascular suture? Is that something you really need? And you also need some anesthesia. As I understand, anesthesia drugs is another high priority. Any other high priority in terms of medications?
They also say they need antibiotics. Not surprisingly, their list features the most expensive medical supplies. Supplies a lot of donors don't include. After all, they're expensive. Getting them will be tough. Getting them there, even tougher. Mostar is a city battered by nearly constant shelling. Southwest Medical Teams has supplies for the hospital there. We all know that just 4 days earlier, a humanitarian aid group, much like Southwest Medical Team, was attacked and killed in Mostar.
It's a big risk to go to Mostar at this time with the big group, especially like this big. And that is my opinion.
One of the doctors from the underground hospital has led us this far, but warns us against going any farther.
Is it a lesser risk with a smaller group in a smaller car, maybe just a TV crew?
Is the risk getting into Mostar, or is the risk once we are in Mostar?
Both.
Both, because although quiet now, Mostar itself is subjected to nearly constant shelling, and so is the road leading in. It's called Russian Roulette Road, because although the Serbians can't see it from the hills above Mostar, they can reach it with their heavy artillery. And firing blind so far, they've hit some 300 vehicles. The decision has been made. We're going in. Right now we're in a car being driven by a Croatian soldier. The rest of the party's in a bus behind us. The decision was made to go because they said there's been no shelling today. But they want us out by dark because that's when the shelling will probably start again. This time, no mortars hit Russian Roulette Road. Plenty have hit Mostar's main hospital, though.
Can you imagine now when there were a bomb falling here, the buildings burned over there, the high-rise burned over there, and we were delivering babies.
They're still delivering babies. No war can stop that. But now the babies are born in the basement.
This baby was born yesterday.
Everybody's in the basement now. It's as safe as any place in Mostar when the bombs and mortars start falling. Certainly safer than Gordina Lanchar's front yard.
Suddenly she heard the explosion, and then she heard the pain and a tremendous burn, and she doesn't remember anything else.
2 weeks ago, shrapnel from a grenade tore into her body, damaging her liver. Gordina says what happened to her is simply fate. She just wants to get out of the hospital and get on with her life. Can this little boy forget what has happened to him so soon? One last thought before we leave Mostar. With all the destruction we saw, the pain we witnessed, this was perhaps the most disturbing sight. It used to be the city's main park, a place where children played. Now, it's a graveyard. There is no more room at the cemetery, so the casualties of this war, mostly civilians, are buried here. The white crosses, we are told, are children. The green markers, Muslims. There are Catholics, Jews, and even Serbs buried here. They couldn't get along in life. Now they lie side by side in death. The casualties of war. This was a posh resort, but like every other hotel along the Adriatic, it is now filled with refugees. Refugees who spill over into trailers. Trailers without heat. Hundreds of thousands of people who not only need food, clothes, and heat, but health care.
We shall not expel from Croatia that...
Croatia's deputy health minister admits his country simply doesn't know what to do with them.
We'll help them, and that is why we welcome your delegation from Southwest Medical Teams from California that is going to help us more on that problem.
In fact, LaForge's Southwest Medical Teams has been invited to return to Croatia in January. This time, he'll bring a team of plastic surgeons and a new understanding of the problem.
Well, this trip has really showed me the enormity of the problem. You know, 500,000 refugees is a number until you start seeing these camps, and then you see every family in complete destitution with such an uncertain future. Where do they go from here? They're facing a winter without proper shelter. Most of them have no money at all, no means. They're strictly reliant on groups like us to keep them alive.
The help that Barry sends is just a trickle where a torrent is needed. Until now, Americans, to Americans, Bosnia-Herzegovina, Croatia, they were just names. Do you think, having looked at all this as they will when they see the videotape, will that change their attitudes?
I think they'll see that these are people, that the names now become faces, and the faces are human beings that need to be helped.
They are the faces of war.